Welcome, I'm Chad Stoloff, for those of you I don't know. Just finished my third year here at Springfield, and thank you. And I've taught sports psychology, advanced coaching methods, and athletic admin leadership with Coach Deering this spring, as well as coaching both the tennis teams. And Chris asked me and Bree asked me to talk about motivation, and I'm probably not going to do that much talking or want to get engagement from everyone here, because it's the end of the day, and the last thing you want to probably do is just sit here and listen. So, but I wanted to start with just a short little story about a teacher. And so here we go. So Marva Collins was born in Alabama in the 1930s. As an African-American girl growing up in the segregated South, she experienced racism and discrimination. And yet, she became a highly successful and celebrated teacher, helping thousands of at-risk students succeed. How did she do it? How did she get so many students who were written off as unteachable to thrive? She provided her students with the gift they needed most: the belief in themselves, the confidence that they could succeed. The source of the gift she gave others was her own self-confidence, the belief that she had in herself. Collins says, in those days it was quite rare to be black and to be successful. She attributes her success to her parents, who, despite their economic circumstances and regardless of prevailing beliefs, brought her up with a sense of pride. In the midst of the pervading culture of discrimination and racism that can be so devastating to a person's sense of self-worth, Collins' parents taught her to be strong and to stand up for herself. Collins learned that to be proud is important to assume a proud posture, one that communicates to everyone, to yourself and others, the message that you are worthy. She recalls her mother often admonishing her and her sister, "Get your head up." Today in her 70s, Collins still walks around with her head high and communicates to all those around her, as well as to herself, her self-confidence and pride. She commands respect through her posture, her voice, her eyes, and of course, her deeds. Sit up straight, express pride through your stride, carry yourself in a way that communicates to the world and to yourself strength and confidence. And it's from this book by Tal Ben-Shahar. Anyone familiar with this teacher? So Tal, you can pass it around. Tal Ben-Shahar is a psychology professor at Harvard, 86 miles down the road. And he teaches a course on happiness. He's been teaching it for years at Harvard, and it's the #1 course at the school. Over 20% of the students take this course, and they just rave about it, because they have, at Ivy League schools and schools of that nature, a lot of pressure on them to succeed and achieve. But what they don't have a lot of times is a lot of skill in coping with that pressure. And so Tal's work and some work out of Stanford, there's a school of design at Stanford University out west in California, and it was an engineering course originally, and it's become a course on how to design your life for well-being, how to live a healthy, balanced life that's purposeful, meaningful, important to you, that serves society. And what they've done with that course now at Stanford, that's become the most popular course. They have it for all incoming freshmen. They have it for sophomores and juniors. They also have it for grad students, so they have different sections where they focus on that. And I was talking to the Dean of Religious Life at University of Southern California. And for those of you who know Coach Sullivan here, our men's volleyball coach, he always tells me who needs the U. right? It's an SC. Every time I hear that, when I say University of Southern California, I hear Coach Sullivan's little mantra in my mind. But I was talking to this gentleman who, a similar role as David McMahon, and they're designing a course right now for all incoming students at University of Southern California, 3,000 plus students, based off Stanford and Harvard's course, because he's been there for a decade, and what he's seen, Varun has seen, is these students are coming in with more and more impressive resumes, more accomplishments. They have internships already coming out of high school, coming into college. But what they are lacking are basic skills like Friendship 101, or how to deal with adversity and be resilient, how to stay motivated throughout the entire course of the semester, 4 years, things like that. They're really good in a narrow pathway, but they're lacking the skills because they've been protected against failure in a lot of capacities in other ways. So why I'm framing it that way and starting with that is because I think it sets the tone to understand. When we look at it, we think about, okay, how do you get the students motivated, and more importantly, the focus, okay, how do we stay motivated? You need to think about what's your why, right? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And when you drill down what your why is, then burnout, as Allison was talking about, is not as much of an issue. Okay? The reason people get burned out is twofold. One, because they've said yes to too much and they completely exhaust themselves. But the emotional burnout happens because we actually lose our why. We lose our reason for what we're doing. It's not what we're doing, it's we lose the why. So those of you who know me, I'm a big reader, and if you haven't read Start With Why, Simon Sinek is an advertising executive originally and now a New York Times best-selling author. Great book, and he gives all these different examples in the business world and artists and things like that. So start with why. So what I want to start with is you can break off into pairs or small groups and spend a few minutes, give you like 3 to 5 minutes, and what's your why? Why do you teach? Or let's say you're not a teacher. Why do you work at Springfield College? Well, why do you choosing to do what you do? Okay? Whether you're an athletic trainer, whatever it is in your capacity, and share with each other. Okay? And then we'll come back and we'll circle back and we'll share some of these ideas. And what I want to have is a discussion and create engagement, and I'll talk more and more about that. So let's start with that.
Yeah, what was that book called? Start With Why?
Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
It'll be a line.
You're sure?
Ready to circle back? All right, so over here, what were some of the things that you're willing to share with the rest of the group? They're not ready. I mean, like, we'll circle back. We'll start with this group here, these ladies, or a few of them.
Well, I came to teaching after many years working as a physical therapist in the community, and my passion, my why has been all through my career wanting to make a difference in the profession. Not just me, not just my patients, but the profession as a whole. And this stepping stone is like I'm educating the next group that's going to be out there doing great things. That's what I tell the students. You need to go out and do great things. I'm counting on you. You are our future. And that, to watch it, to see them and hear stories back is why.
Another from this group?
I think generally, though, it's all a very similar theme that we're in it for the students, just loving, seeing them learning and understanding and moving forward and growing as their lives. But we all kind of have variations of that kind of.
How about over here?
I am a PE teacher, actually. I like to be a teacher, and I think I'm good at teaching students to learn skills, small skills. And I choose Sun Yat-sen University just because that's a university and a very beautiful campus. And the faculty member, the faculty and the colleagues are very friendly, and the salary is good.
I love it. That's right. Wonderful. And one of these two groups? Yeah, go ahead.
After 10 years working in Latin America, I came back to Springfield College, and I wanted to continue to learn about our international dimension and what we meant to our government systems around the world, and to support opportunities for U.S. nationals also to include the international dimension. This year I was able to welcome back a former exchange visitor, Professor Champagne, who first arrived here 18 years ago. He's still here with us. Professor Naomi Graves, who passed away. And most recently I had the opportunity on a second sabbatical to go visit 60 alums in 6 different nations. Our former president forgot about many of these different nations. So part of my effort was to go back and communicate with these alumni in the Caribbean and Central America. President Flynn was big on China and Hong Kong, but he forgot about Costa Rica and Curacao. Our alums down there have done just as much in their communities, giving service to their communities and nations as have our China. So international students and working with
Thank you. Thank you. Either of these two groups? You don't have to shoot.
Well, I think, well, a couple things we shared, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we still, we like what we do and like, you know, who we were able to work with, and we're successful at what we do. I mean, it's gratifying what we're able to accomplish in our work here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of independence, and at least I've had it, and a lot of, within limits, I've got a huge amount of freedom to choose where I want to focus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of that flexibility and autonomy,
Yeah.
and I, you know, I can decide pretty much how to juggle all of the things I need to accomplish.
Exactly. So off that point, there's scientists have found, so Deci and Ryan in the 1970s, they're up in Rochester, New York, found that we have 3 human drives. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter ethnicity, race, background, you name it. They are autonomy, that sense of control. So all human beings want a sense of control. If you give a baby a bottle, right, and that baby can hold the bottle, and you go and pull that bottle out of their hands, what does the baby do? Cry, and tries and grabs it back, right? Think about, so that's early on in life. What happens as people get older and they're not able to drive anymore? Same thing, right? That frustration, that that independence, that autonomy, that sense of control, like now I have to be dependent on others. You see it at both ends of the life spectrum, right? So autonomy. We all want a sense of autonomy, like we're in control of our lives. Second, as you talked about, is mastery, okay? Or competence. They named it competence. Mastery is another word for it. So a sense that you're getting better, you're achieving, you're making progress. If we're not growing, we're dying. When you think about any project you've worked on, anything you've done, if you don't feel like you're making progress, you're not learning, you're not growing, what do you want to do? Quit, move on, right? Think about, let's say maybe anybody in here grow up and play a musical instrument or play a sport. And when you got to the point where you said, Mom, Dad, whoever, I'm gonna, I want to quit this, why did that come about? Why did you want to stop? A lot of times it's because you don't think you're getting any better. If you sense that you're improving, you're making progress. So I went from level 1 to level 2 in karate, or I couldn't play this song before on the piano and now I can. You're excited, right? You're motivated to go and practice and play, go to the recital and do the next thing. But if you don't think you can get it and you just keep struggling, like what's the point? I'm just not good at this, right? And the third, anybody know what the third thing they found? So we have autonomy. The second one was? Competence or mastery? Relatedness. That's exactly right. Or a sense of purpose. Okay, so relatedness, purpose. So without those three components, autonomy, competence, and relatedness or purpose, it's hard to be motivated for ourselves as well as our students. If we can think in that construct, that framework, how do we design? So that's why I started looking at it. I was like, okay, there's something to be said for the most popular class at a school when people have a variety of interests, right? One person likes music, another person doesn't have any interest in studying music. Another person likes engineering, another person, all they think about is the Boston Red Sox, right? And yet, there's a commonality that everybody's going, I love that course. You've got to take that course, right? So there's two things going on there. One is the person teaching it or the people teaching it over a long period of time, sustained excellence. Success leaves clues, right? You go on this campus and you go into an amazing class and you see the energy, you feel the energy, you see the excitement in people's eyes. They say that eyes are the windows to the soul, right? You see it in the students, they're talking about it. They're going to talk about our classes one way or the other, right? Very rarely are they going to be in that middle ground. They're either going to be saying, that's a class, you've got to take that class from her. That's an unbelievable experience, you'll learn so much, boom, boom, boom. Or they're saying the opposite. They're going to talk one way or the other. So, what challenges, we talked about it, you talked about like that relatedness, that purpose. What I want you to do now is get back into the groups. What challenges do we have here that affect your sense of autonomy, your sense of mastery, your sense of that purpose, that drive down or suppress your motivation? Because there's forces, right? To pretend like, as Tony was up here with the elephant earlier in the room, to pretend that those don't exist is foolish. It's foolish. They do exist, right? So the question is, what are some good problem-solving strategies, techniques, tools, hacks to help us navigate that pathway? And going in the future, where we do have some pressures on us for our autonomy, or that resistance as well as the students from a standpoint of the motivation to come to the class and to put their full effort into it as you. All right, so talk about the challenges now for the next few minutes that you face.
There are two things that have to be wrapped there is that I'm going to lose motivation sometimes.
All right, we'll circle back. Circle back.
Those kinds of stress your student then and sat there with the lack of confidence.
Even as decorative is for dropping out. But it's not sort of goes like that.
What are your challenges then?
I think in athletic training, because we provide healthcare as well as timing, being in that dual role. And we also kind of talked about in terms of autonomy, where we're junior faculty, so we don't necessarily have a whole lot of choice in maybe what we're teaching, or where there's senior faculty who obviously have put their time in and deserve that opportunity. So, but within the course, we're given a lot of freedom to kind of make it our own, which is nice. But yeah, timing was a big one for us. In terms of relatedness and purpose, we feel like this institution really does support our purpose as athletic trainers. So, always got it.
Well, how do you combat the issue of timing? What successful strategies have you found?
I went to a work-life balance seminar earlier today.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, the nice thing for us is we are providing healthcare, we're teaching through service. So we're kind of blending what we're doing. It's I feel like when I'm here, I'm an educator, and I'm able to teach in the setting that I'm also providing healthcare to. So I try to merge the two so that it doesn't feel like two separate entities or jobs, and just try to make it as seamless as I can.
Other challenges that were discussed?
We were talking about information or lack thereof. You can't be involved in every decision, but if information flows and people will listen to at all levels, it makes a huge difference. Again, you can't be involved in or necessarily know everything, but when decisions are made that are going to be affecting you, it's nice to be able to say something, especially when there's going to be a decision made that you know that what you're doing right now is going to be an issue and no one's listening to you about it. Doesn't happen often, but it can happen. And then after the fact, change is made, and there's a problem right where you thought it was going to be.
Yes. We all have two things that are really important to us, right? Besides these drives. And that's a sense, a feeling we want to be heard, right? That's why that baby cries. Get your attention, right? I need food, I need this, I need that, right? So when you take that away, or that sense, that appearance, right, from people, it's never good. Never leads to a good road, and we have human history to tell us that, right? But when you provide that sense that, okay, we're going to listen to you, and you provide the sense of we're going to appreciate you. That's the other thing. We all want a sense of feeling that we're appreciated for who we are, what we do, right? When we feel devalued, we don't want to be part of that environment anymore, right? We want to disengage from that environment. So if you have a classroom or a setting where you're listening to the students, you're actually giving them an opportunity to express themselves, and you appreciate that, you're more likely to find that they're more willing to engage, right? Share more about that. But if you're both in the classroom setting and outside, as you're talking about, if you shut that down, people will be very unhappy, very displeased, right? What other challenges affect your motivation or that you discussed? What challenges do we have? Anything else?
We talked a little bit about the autonomy, that sense of control, when so many things are changing on campus and not really knowing what that outcome will be.
Why is that difficult, or what's difficult about that?
The unknown, and that likely none of us in this room really have a say in that.
Yeah, we have an order of priorities, and for some people, number one on that list is certainty. For others, it might be number 6, or there in between. But if your needs, number one is certainty, and that you're in an uncertain climate, environment, that's really unsettling, right? So how do we deal with that in a positive way? How do we deal with that in a constructive way, knowing that, okay, there are things like the serenity prayer, knowing the difference between what's inside my control and what's outside my control, right? So I'm a tennis coach, and a lot of times we'll talk to the tennis players and we'll say, like, okay, can you control the weather? Because we'll be playing a match outside and it's windy, and you hear 80% of the tennis players complaining about the wind. We're like, is that inside your locus of control? Is that inside your construct that you can affect the weather? By complaining more about it, you're expending all that energy and focus on something outside your control. Not easy to do, to refocus, right? And to change the attitude and behavior, but really important. Really important, because nobody's controlling the weather, okay, or anything else, like the court surface. We go and we play on one court, and that's different than another location, right? So learning to stay inside our lane is really helpful, but really difficult. So I like to tell a little story of this Navy SEAL I know. He was climbing, they're doing training, and they're climbing up a 40-foot wall, but he was actually really scared of heights. But that was the requirement, so they're doing that, and then you rappel down. So he goes up about 35 feet, and he starts freaking out. And yes, Navy SEALs, as big and bad as we put them on the screen and all these movies, they do freak out. Okay? They're human beings as well, and they have fears and doubts and insecurities just like the rest of us. So he's up 35 feet, and he's freaking out, and his instructor is not going anywhere. And his instructor goes up, and he's like, what's the problem? And he's like, oh my gosh, like, if the rope breaks, I fall, I'm going to be done, and all this. And the instructor says to him, just focus on your 3 feet of control. How far you can reach your hands and how far you can reach your legs. Everything else is outside your lane. Everything else is outside of your circle of control. You just focus on your 3 feet of control, and you'll go up 5 more feet, you're going to rappel down. And this gentleman shared that story with me, went up 5 more feet, you're still, shaking emotionally, came down. But what he learned from that experience that he shared with me is that all learning is state dependent. So what do I mean by that? Okay, I'm going to give you an example. I'd like everybody to close their eyes. Okay. Everybody to close their eyes. If you would. And I want you to imagine an event from your memory when you're 10 years or younger. Go back in your memory. You can pick a positive memory, whatever you'd like. Okay? But when you were 10 years of age or younger, and play that movie back in your mind. Okay? It could be a positive memory like a birthday or whatever it is. Play that video. All right, open your eyes, please. Did everybody pick something from memory? Yeah. Now, everyone in here, without disclosing anybody's age, right? That's more than 10 years ago, right? But how come you can feel it, like in your body, like it happened yesterday, or it happened this morning? How come it's so vivid to you? Because there's strong emotion tied to that memory. So the back of our skull is our hippocampus, right? And that's our memory center. Okay? Long-term memory. Do you know what's right next to it? What part of the brain? Watch, I've been saying this all along and I'm wrong. Anyone? It's the amygdala. The amygdala. Fight or flight, right? Your emotions. It's not an accident that those two are right next to each other. So every really strong memory you have, okay, that you've remembered for your life, has a very strong emotional tie, either positive or negative for you. You got to choose your memory, right? You get to choose. I didn't tell you, but you can remember it. You can still feel it in your body like it was yesterday. And it stays with you for life because all learning is state dependent, as in your emotional state. Your emotional state. So you can have the best information to pass on to your friends, family, students, you name it, right? But if their emotional state is at 0, as in boredom, right? Are they going to retain it long term? Right? What's 100 times 0? What's 1,000,000 times 0? So a lot of times we focus so much as in education on the content knowledge, and we go, all right, we got to have great content, which we do. I'm not arguing that at all. But I think just as important is we have to make sure we've grabbed people's attention and gotten their emotional state higher than 0. Because if they come into a class at 0, boredom, like they don't care, why am I even taking this history class or whatever it is, why am I taking sports psychology, I just have to take it, this is stupid, this is a waste of $3,000, a waste of 15 weeks, a waste of so many hours, forget this, they're not going to engage. So I don't really think that we actually motivate students. I think what we do is we create the conditions, just like a garden. Okay, we create the conditions that allow them to raise their emotional state of engagement. It's like that story I told you with the Navy SEAL. That was a long time ago for that guy, 30 plus years ago. And he still remembers it like yesterday. He told it in my class. Right? And you could see his entire body physiologically light up. Right? Because he remembers that moment so vividly. So how do we create powerful moments, memorable experiences, and as others have talked about, through experiential learning, and for ourselves so that we are lit up, we're alive when we go into the classroom. right? Because if we go into the setting to teach people and I'm operating like I'm bored, why are you going to be that interested? Because what signals am I sending, right? So you remember here is information. Everybody, if you could, put out your left arm. Okay, your other left arm, right? Okay. And emotion, put out your right arm. Okay. And clasp them together is tied into long-term memory. Information and emotion goes into long-term memory. So if you can come at it from that standpoint and ask questions to get people engaged, the learning, I think, goes up. Okay? Not just I think, the research shows. But I've experienced it in some of the classes I've taught in the settings. Appreciate the people, ask them questions, listen to them. Tie it in to what are their needs, wants, and desires? Why are they in this class? Why are they in that setting? Right? What's important to them? How can you give them great value? So right now, a lot of people talk about shows, right? Like Netflix and things like that. Well, if we take some of the entertainment aspect and we tie it into some of the education aspect, I think we can blend the two. What I mean by that is, anybody here have Netflix? Yeah? Okay, what is Netflix or Hulu or any of those, what do they do at the end of the show? Like you watch.
Preview the next one.
Next one.
That's right.
Yeah, they
Right?
started.
And they started, right? And what happens to us?
We get hooked.
We get hooked. So what's your hook? How do you hook the students? When you walk in the class, right, you walk in the setting, how do you hook them? Because they're hooked on Netflix. They're hooked on YouTube. They're hooked on what's ever happening on social media and things like that, Instagram and Snapchat and whatever, right? That's what they walked in with. So the question we have to ask ourselves as educators is, how do I hook them? How do we get them to hook each other into the topic matter? And I think we could learn from those businesses rather than just, okay, say, oh, that's horrible and things like that, or the entertainment thing, and go, all right. Because if you think about, like, a great documentary, a great movie you've seen, it's tied to your heart. When you tie the heart, the head, and the hands together, you've got magic. Right? The heart is that emotion. The head, okay, is the thoughts, the idea generation, and the hands is the action. So, like, you start moving. You know, we've been sitting a while, things like that. We're finishing here. You start moving. When the body moves, the mind grooves. When the body moves, the mind grooves. So, we all know, like, exercise is medicine, things like that. If you sit slouched for a few hours, it's really hard to be mentally and emotionally engaged, right? Think about it if you're on an airplane and you're flying across the ocean. Right? Or to China, right? Even farther. It's hard to stay alert. But if you get the students emotionally engaged, first and foremost, and then physically engaged, right? It's a lot easier to raise the level of intention and engagement. Thoughts, questions, concerns about your motivation, students' motivations, questions? We'll just finish with that. First one without a PowerPoint.
How would you suggest for large classrooms, like 100 students or so, because engagement and that kind of interaction is easier when you can get personal with people, but when I mean, you can't stand up there and tap dance, or can't, do you have any other suggestions on that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great question. So, have you ever been to a concert in your life?
Yeah, you.
How many people are in the audience in a concert?
Yeah, thousands,
And you've been to some concerts maybe that are pretty good or great, and others that aren't so much, right?
yeah.
So,
The energy of the performer.
yes.
So not
Right.
necessarily having them physically doing things, but passing on your energy.
Exactly. So go to, say, like a large rally in a speech, right? It can be like a lecture where they're in, I mean, I Have a Dream, right? Martin Luther King standing there. How many people were in Washington, D.C.? Right? They weren't having like small little discussions while he's giving that speech, but everybody was locked in. Is that easy? No, right? Really, really difficult. But it's vital. So important. Because what we do is we associate, we link things together all the time. And we either go, we're in or we're out. So for example, if I associate school, class with boredom, right? Then what I do is I make the leap to learning. Learning is boring. Not just school. I'm checked out of school now, but I'm checked out of learning. And we're either going to create problem solvers who are leaders, okay, problem solvers in this world, or problem creators. I don't believe that there's any wishy-washy there, like middle ground. I think we're either creating problem solvers that are going, okay, these are big issues, right? Over 1 billion people in this world don't have access to clean water, and we have over 7 billion people on this planet. We're going up towards 10 and climbing. Like, that's a big issue. We need people working on that and coming up with creative solutions like Charity Water. The guy did out of New York City, right? So I think there's ways, but it definitely is more challenging. But what I would look to is, that's why I started with Tal Ben Shahar. He's not operating in a class of 20. He's operating a big lecture hall. And the same thing applies at some of these big institutions like in Arizona State or Ohio State. They've got a lecture hall of, hundreds, yet they have a waiting list. There are some teachers with a waiting list where you have to apply to get into the class. Waiting list of over 100. And it's not just because it's organic chemistry, right? It's because that teacher, like, okay, wow, I've got to take a class with Dr. Moosberger. It doesn't matter what it is. And then I will take 5 more classes with her. Maybe I'll even go into that department because she's that good. Yes. Then, think about it too. Like, think globally, and now what does that do for your institution? You can get no better marketing, advertising. You can't buy that. You cannot buy that and put that on 91 on the billboard. Because everybody, you do something really well or really poorly, and 10 people are going to know about it. Right? So you go and it's like, wow, I took that class from so-and-so. You've got to take that class. There are classes on this campus that aren't the smallest class, but everybody's saying you've got to go take it from that teacher. And the same thing's happening on the reverse.
First, yeah.
Right? Right. And which do we want to be? That's my question. And how do we achieve that? You want a better answer, you have to ask a better question. So the quality of our lives go back to the quality of our questions. Okay, if you want a different answer, you have to ask a different question. So if I ask myself, why am I so stupid at math? What does my brain do? What does your brain do if you ask yourself that question? Comes up, that's right, comes up with all the reasons why. That's a dumb question. It's the wrong question. I need to just reframe, pivot. The question is, how can I get good at math? Now what does my brain do? Comes up with 50 ways how to get good at math. But it's easy just to start off at that first level of questioning, which our students do a lot, and we do a lot, and just go to the default setting. Well, I'm just not good at that. I can never be good at that. Right? This is the way it'll always be. And we play that tape over and over and over. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. On average, 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you all had last week. Right? So how do you change your thinking? One of the ways I change it is through reading. Because your inputs lead
I hate to
outputs.
say that.
What's that?
I hated to say that.
That's right. Your inputs lead outputs. So when I find out that Adam Grant, who's a professor at University of Pennsylvania, is the top teacher at the school for 6 years running, and there's a wait list of 265 students to get into his class, I go, huh, he's doing something right. Because he's got people that are really engaged and want to learn from him and the way he's doing it, because it's not the content. There are other teachers all around the world that are teaching the same thing, but he's doing it a different way. Just like an entertainer, where you'll go and you'll be like, I might pay $325 to see Taylor Swift, right? But I'm not paying $325 to see some person I've never heard of. There's something there. It hooked you. We're up on time. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome. Pass these out real quickly if you would.